Now, when you have 2 long years to wait for something, there's always that chance that it won't quite live up to all the expectations and hype that have been built up around it. Which, no, isn't me trying to right away say that I think this was a bad or disappointing episode. I actually thought it was pretty good and enjoyed it quite a bit. Only that it probably wasn't exactly what some might have hoped for and expected, and that in some ways it felt more like a necessary refresher and what to expect in this season of The Mandalorian, more so than anything else. And that's mainly because, the getting the refresher part anyway, well, it's because it hasn't really been 2 years since we'd seen the story of Din Djarin and Grogu continue, has it? We actually got what was basically a mini Mandalorian Season 2.5 right in the middle of the Book of Boba Fett a year ago, where he did everything from become an apostate to reunite with Grogu to get a whole brand new ship. And in a way, I think this opening episode of Season 3 pays the price for that mini-series in the Book of Boba Fett by having to not only kind of reiterate what happened there, and mainly for those who didn't see that show, but also because those episodes in the Book of Boba Fett were some truly amazing episodes, jam-packed with not only hugely important plot progression, but featuring characters like, well, Mando and Grogu themselves, not to mention Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka, and Boba Fett as well. And so, to be blunt about it, this episode just wasn't as good as those in comparison, and not only that, but it slows the story way, way down in comparison. And again, it spends precious time, and it's really precious when the episodes are only 30 minutes long. It spends it going over what happened in the Book of Boba Fett, and introducing whole new plot threads, which we'll get into soon enough. But first, I want to start with the opening sequence, which, in all reality, wasn't technically needed and seems to primarily serve as a way to show off Mando's new ship and to put pretty much the exact same conversation from the Book of Boba Fett between Din and the Armorer into this show, the one about him removing his helmet, becoming an apostate, and now only being able to redeem himself in the living waters of Mandalore. Basically, it just reminded us of what the main quest is that Din Djarin is now on, and that he got it from the Armorer in Book of Boba Fett. And that's not to say the whole opening sequence wasn't pretty awesome. I thought what was essentially a Mandalorian baptism and vow-taking ceremony was great to see, and the giant alligator/turtle fight was a cool-looking spectacle to behold. But in all reality, Din learns nothing new by going there and didn't need to speak to the Armorer about this, what maybe looks like a piece of stone tablet or something from Mandalore. Instead, it feels like the tablet just serves as an excuse for him to go back there in the first place to have this conversation all over again. Or, at least at face value, that opening sequence doesn't seem to do any more than that, but when you dig a little deeper and look a little closer, there's a few very, very interesting things revealed here. The first of which is that the, let's call it, Armorer's covert is growing and growing pretty fast, that it has picked up many new members since we saw it down to 2 members in the Book of Boba Fett. Which contrasts very nicely with the end of the episode where we see that Bo-Katan and her sort of faction of Mandalorians has completely fallen apart after she failed to recover the Darksaber, that the others just took her fleet and are out murking, basically. And perhaps the most interesting takeaway from this is that while the Armorer's covert is, you could say, thriving by following the more old-school way and seems to be all about, well, being all a tight-knit group or family that fights for and cares about each other and Mandalorians in general, which that opening fight showcases perfectly, the more new school Mandalorians who don't quite follow the creed the same way, the ones who follow Bo-Katan, well, they only seem to care about following power, following whoever has the Darksaber, and they quickly give up on their goal of reestablishing Mandalore when she couldn't deliver it. Bo-Katan herself even tells Din, after asking him if he still has the Darksaber, to go wave it around and they'll do whatever you say, because again, they're all about following power, not being a part of the way for the sake of it, like the covert is. And I also can't help but find the irony in Bo-Katan blaming the fall of Mandalore on the factions or the cults who split off from the main group, when it's they who seem to be the ones who truly care about Mandalore itself, about the way and keeping it going. Heck, just look how quickly Bo-Katan has given up on everything when she isn't the one leading the effort to restore Mandalore. It's not like she's still fighting by any means she can when she's down to just herself, even though the Armorer and Paz Vizsla, when down to just the 2 of them, they kept on fighting and never gave up on the creed, and they're now growing again. And speaking of Paz Vizsla and building the covert back up, he seems almost proud of this new foundling getting their helmet and extremely protective of the whole covert, putting himself in front of the beast a couple different times to protect others. And though he's kind of been shown to be a bit of an ass and a foil for Din in the past, in this episode, dare I say, some leadership qualities were emerging. Could we, as crazy as it sounds, could we be seeing the eventual next leader of the Mandalorians? Anyway, after this opening sequence, one might think that Din's next stop would be to head to Mandalore to start his search for the living waters, but it isn't. And so, after getting what is, I'd say, an Ahsoka series tease, a cool one mind you, where Grogu sees some Purrgil soaring through hyperspace, keeping in mind it was Purrgil who whisked Ezra and Thrawn away in Rebels, and Ahsoka is currently looking for the both of them, we instead end up back on Navarro, where Mando needs a droid he can trust, and he wants to see if he can fix IG-11, who melted and blew up in Season 1. And though I certainly get that this would be the only droid that Mando truly trusts, he came to really care about IG-11, which I thought was a great little plotline in Season 1. It still kind of reminds me of one of the complaints I remember from back in Season 1, that a lot of people said that, at times, the show felt a lot like a video game, where Mando would take random fetch quests all the while upgrading his gear and so on, just like in a video game. And so what the next part of the episode kind of reminded me of is when you're playing a game and there's the main storyline, the very clear and obvious main storyline, but there's also some side quests you can take to, level up a bit and get some extra stuff to maybe be more prepared for the main quest. To me, that's what this felt like, because basically what Mando going to Navarro turns into is Mando ignoring the main storyline or putting it on hold a bit in order to go pick up and fill up his quest log with a bunch of side quests. Because not only was Mando not able to simply repair an all but destroyed IG-11, which means he now has to seek out a new part for him, but he and High Magistrate Greef Karga also run into a group of pirates trying to get into a school that used to be a bar, which causes a fight, one that clearly is going to lead to further problems that will need to be dealt with. That becomes even more obvious when, after leaving the planet, Mando runs into one of the pirates he and Greef let get away after killing a few of the others, and Mando then blows up almost a half-dozen pirate fighters before encountering, Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean aboard the pirate flagship. Or at least someone who definitely reminded me of him, but who was actually a pirate named Gorian Shard, who, again, is obviously going to need to be dealt with later on in the season, and almost no doubt in an episode or two when Mando returns with the part he gets for IG-11 that the Anzellans sent him for. And speaking of them, they of course help give us our obligatory cute Grogu scene for the episode, which, don't get me wrong, is fine, and I know him hugging the little Anzellan probably melted some hearts and sold some toys as well. And I get some people eat that stuff up and love it, and again, that's all fine. But you can't help but ask if this is the real reason Grogu is back so soon, for these moments and that uncanny ability to sell toys. Either way, after all this, we're then on to the planet Kalevala in Mandalorian space for a meeting with Bo-Katan, where she's all alone in a very cool-looking Mandalorian castle, and Din tells her he's now ready to join her. But she says there's nothing left to join, which is something I talked quite a bit about before in this review, and it's a really good scene all around, especially when compared to that opening. And to just quickly reiterate, she's dejected and has given up after failing to recover the Darksaber, and those that have followed her or were following her have abandoned her. There's then also a few other things of note in this episode, like learning that no, Cara Dune isn't just going to disappear without a trace or mention. Turns out that after helping catch Moff Gideon, she joined a New Republic Special Forces team, and speaking of Gideon, he's been sent to face a New Republic war tribunal. And so when you step back and look at this, again, rather short 30-minute episode, one of only 8 episodes we'll get this season, which somehow makes it feel even shorter, you're honestly left with some really, really, really cool and fun battles and visuals. This episode was, I'd say, maybe the best looking overall in the entire series. But not a lot really happened, especially in regards to the main storyline, and especially when you again compare it to what happened in the Book of Boba Fett for the characters, how quickly things seem to progress there. I feel like other than the start of some side quests, you could probably skip this episode and not have missed much of consequence for the bigger picture, which is ironic because you couldn't have skipped those Book of Boba Fett episodes. And though we obviously have no idea where the, let's call it, pirate subplot is ultimately headed, what might eventually be revealed because of them, maybe they're working with or for the remnants of the Empire, who knows, it could in theory be big for the big picture. Or maybe it leads to more info about Grogu. Could these pirates be part of the same group that originally had him captured in Season 1? But right now it only feels like something added because the main storyline isn't going to maybe be that long or as dominating the season as we potentially thought it might be, especially after hearing someone like Jon Favreau talk about how big this season was indeed going to be. So much so that you'd think you'd really wouldn't be able to afford to start the season off with a 30-minute episode that merely recapped and again kind of introduced some new side quests. And yeah, maybe I'm sounding a bit harsh towards this episode, when again, I did enjoy it. I don't think it was bad as much as I'm surprised it wasn't a bit more. Again, in regards to the main storyline, especially when you compare it to all that happened in the Book of Boba Fett, it just seems like there could be and should be so much going on that you'd maybe struggle to fit it all into one 8-episode season. I don't know, I certainly don't want to judge the whole season on one episode, and I have little doubt there will be some cool stuff and big reveals eventually. I have no doubt the season is going to be probably pretty damn good. But right now, the first episode was a bit of a slow start. Well, that's all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or did you maybe find it a bit underwhelming? And if so, are our own expectations to blame for that? Whatever you think, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.